I was 42 when I was arrested for not giving up my seat to a white man.
I was 15 when I was arrested for not giving up my seat because I'm black.
History thinks I stayed seated because I was tired, old.
History thinks I remained seated because I was a rebellious teenager, delinquent.
I was no more tired than I was after any normal work day as a seamstress.
I was a straight A student at Booker Washington High.
I was only 42, but I was tired. But not in the physical heavy bones way.
I was only 15 and I was tired, but not in the restless looking to stir up trouble
I was
way.
tired in that way that you don't want to take such abuse anymore. Anyway,
I was tired in that way that I'm tired of doing the right thing for the wrong reason kind of way.
I was arrested December 1st, 1955. I made a choice that day.
I was arrested and convicted March 1955, 9 months before Rosa Parks. My story would go on to be part of Browder versus Gale, the Supreme Court ruling that ended segregation on public transportation.
It was feared that my case wouldn't be taken seriously because of my history with the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People.
I would later move to New York to escape the pressures of notoriety. Who would think that standing up for your constitutional right would make you a saint and a villain all at the same time?
Yes, I was secretary at my local branch of the NAACP. But who in their right mind wouldn't give time to fight for their civil rights? The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People was a necessary in our society.
The world wouldn't remember me. The world wouldn't remember the name Claudette Colvin.
My image and my story will be known the world over. The world will not forget the name Rosa Parks. I boarded the bus in downtown Montgomery, Alabama, December 1st, 1955, Thursday, late afternoon. I took a seat in the colored section of the bus, 4 rows behind the driver. The first 4 rows, of course, reserved for white folk. As we headed out of downtown, the white passengers began to fill the front section of the bus. One white man was left standing. The colored section around me was filled.
All right now, you 4. You 4, go ahead, get on up.
The young colored woman sitting next to me and the two colored gentlemen across the aisle did as they were told, got to their feet, and began to stand at the already crowded back of the bus.
All right now, you still sitting there? I said get up.
I'm not in the white section.
You know the rules now. The white section is filled. So I need you to vacate that seat so this man can sit.
There are 3 perfectly good seats available to him.
I've seen you on this bus before. You know good and well that the whites and coloreds can't share a row. I have the right to make room for other passengers. The white section is full. And so I say, you need to get up and go on to the back. You all gonna make it hard on yourself, or you all gonna move?
I'm not moving. I paid my fare. I'm in the colored section. I'm not moving.
Then you know what needs to be done. I'll call the police.
You may do as you must. I had been pushed to the point where I was tired of being pushed. In that moment, I had no fear. I had decided once and for all I had a right to remain seated, and so I did. It was Joanne Robinson, an English teacher at Alabama State College and president of the local chapter of the Women's Political Council, or WPC, who would take the lead in what was to become the altering change that was needed, the Montgomery bus boycott.
The arrest of Claudette Colvin set off a firestorm of support. Whites and blacks from all over the country sent money to support her case. But after the fervor died down, nothing happened. Then came the arrest of Mrs. Rosa Parks. Respected, eloquent, loved the community over, her arrest would set off a fire that would glow longer and brighter. You see, for years, Negro riders had endured daily humiliation riding city buses. We'd made complaints in the past. The Women's Political Council, of which I'm current president, spoke with bus company executives to no avail. We finally made audience with Mayor Gale and presented our grievances.
I'm tired of the discourtesies, the obscene language, and the name-calling and disrespect of the drivers. Also, Buses stop by the block in white neighborhoods, but every 2 blocks in colored neighborhoods. We had 70% of city bus ridership.
Yes, and I've been riding the same bus for 12 years. Same route, yet the bus driver requires me and the other Negro riders to pay fares in the front of the bus. Then we're told to reboard in the back. Oh, and I've witnessed times where a bus driver will pull off before a passenger could reboard in the rear. They don't care about our safety.
The first 10 double sections of each bus are permanently reserved for white passengers. These seats remain reserved even when the bus is empty of white passengers. I can't tell you how many times after all day standing on my feet, I am left to stand at the back of a crowded bus while empty seats remain.
After hearing our grievances, Mayor Gale made the following citywide request. Buses were to stop at each block over the entire city. All riders were to be received through the front doors. Bus drivers were to show respect. We were heard, but our delight was short-lived. The behaviors of the past returned only weeks later. For months, the Women's Political Council had been discussing the B word. Yes, boycott. We planned to hit Montgomery in the pocketbook. We would start with one day, Monday, December 5th. With the help of 2 of my senior students and a midnight visit to the business department at Alabama State, enough flyers were mimeographed to blanket the city of Montgomery. There wouldn't be a colored man, woman, girl, or boy who wouldn't know about the boycott. By 4 a.m., we had finished duplicating, boxing, and loading the flyers into our cars. By 7 a.m., we had finished our distribution map. Yes, up all night. I had classes to teach. They had classes to attend. WPC members distributed flyers to schools, businesses, beer halls, barbershops, everywhere. Oh, and everything went as planned. There wasn't a single suspicion. No one knew where the flyers had come from.
Joanne Robinson, I need to speak to you. My office, now.
Turns out Dr. Trenholm, president of the college, my boss, had been given a flyer by a young woman who didn't even live in Montgomery. She was from Mobile, and boy was he
Mrs. Robinson. Little birdie told me that you and 2 of your students were seen in the wee hours this morning leaving the mimeograph room.
That's right, sir.
I contacted Mr. Cannon, and he informed me he gave you permission to use 35 reams of paper from the business department. I then received a copy of this leaflet. Did you print these?
Yes, sir.
This leaflet is propaganda against city buses.
People are being arrested, sir. Most recently, a woman by the name of Mrs. Rosa Parks.
Yes, I've read about that. Broke the law, not giving up her seat on the city bus.
She wasn't breaking the law, sir. Constitutional rights are being violated. But even more, many are being humiliated and degraded.
Humiliated? How?
Yes, many of our citizens ride the bus because they cannot afford cars. Their only means of transportation is a daily, evil, awful experience.
This doesn't affect you. Mrs. Robinson, you don't ride the bus.
Oh, I did once. My first few months in Montgomery were blissful, sir, 6 years ago. I adored my students, colleagues, and my job. Winter break that year was my first trip back to Ohio in a while. I planned to take the bus that night to my friend's house, and then we would ride to the airport together. The bus was almost empty when I boarded. There was one white woman sitting in the 3rd row and one black man sitting in the back. I sat down in the 5th row. I was on such a cloud. I don't remember closing my eyes, yet I was envisioning the wonderful time I'd have with my friends and family back in Ohio.
Yes, but what does that have to do with...
My reverie was burst by the most unpleasant voice, sir. I opened my eyes. The bus driver had stopped the bus. He was yelling at me. Your nigger ass might be allowed to ride in the 5th row on some other Montgomery City bus. But by damn, you won't be doing it here. He stood over me. He raised his hand just like this. He planned to strike me. Get up. Get out of there. I jumped out of the seat and I ran to the front of the bus and I stepped down to the lower level. In my haste, I'd forgotten that we were supposed to depart through the back, not the front, but I was so upset and tears were blinding me. The bus driver opened the door. I stepped off the bus and walked back to the college. I thank God none of my students had witnessed such a sight. I would have died from embarrassment. My friend retrieved me and drove me to the airport. I cried all the way there. All these years, I'll never forget the shame I felt. And to know that others suffered every day hurts my heart. I made it a priority to change this. Now we found a way. The WPC.
WPC.
Women's Political Council, sir. We're local. We're an organization gathered for the sole purpose of fighting the wrongs being done. Blacks are suffering in this city, sir.
This leaflet calls for a boycott on Monday. And this sounds like trouble. And trouble isn't something I want happen in my school involving my teachers.
I understand, sir.
I don't believe you do.
Sir, if the disrespect continues, some of our people will take matters into their own hands. This boycott will give voice to those who have none, drive solidarity. Montgomery isn't a pressure cooker. If we don't do something now, our people will implode.
I hear you. And I will trust you. But I also warn you, Mrs. Robinson, be careful and work behind the scenes and make sure you don't get the college involved.
I promise, sir.
Don't dare neglect your duties as a faculty member.
Yes, sir.
You may go. And Mrs. Robinson,
Yes, sir.
don't make me regret not firing you today.
The one-day boycott would be such a success that it would last for another 381 days. Eventually, Montgomery would relent, and we would be allowed to sit wherever we wanted to on the bus. But the war was not over. Its general, a young minister, Dr. Martin Luther King, would win the hearts of whites and blacks the world over. But yet another firebrand was waiting in the wings. Diane Nash is just a young woman enrolled at Fisk. She would battle segregation in Nashville, Tennessee, through the help of a powerful organization, SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
Freedom now. 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 Freedom now.
In 1959, I transferred from Howard University in Washington, D.C. to Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. Fisk was the most prominent black school in the nation, and moving to Tennessee was a boom. Let's see. I grew up in Southside Chicago, middle class and Catholic. My parents and grandmother were very protective over me, so moving to Fisk was a chance for me to experience personal freedom, figure out who I was and who I'd become in my own terms and at my own pace. The men at Fisk were handsome, intelligent, and gentlemanly. My first date was to the Tennessee State Fair. The cotton candy, the Ferris wheel. I will go to the powder room for now. Try not to miss me too hard.
You know I will, Diane. What's wrong? Not this again. I'm getting pretty tired of you pretending that every time you see a Jim Crow sign, it's your first brush with segregation.
There's no pretending about it. It's a direct slap in the face every time, and I have had it.
Oh, no. I hear the wheels turning in that pretty little head of yours. What are you thinking about now?
How to stop this nonsense. We've got to find
Diane, listen, what did you come to Fisk for?
for education, to earn my degree, of course.
Then do that. Go to class during the week, go to parties on the weekend, get your degree, and stop worrying about this.
I can't stop worrying about this. I'm tired of not being able to try things on when I'm shopping. I'm sick of not being allowed to eat at the counters when I'm finished shopping.
Chicago's just as segregated.
But nowhere nearly as overt as Tennessee. And by just going along with this nonsense, we're agreeing, and it has to stop.
Good luck.
My first move was to seek others that think as I do. I was introduced to James Lawson, activist and university professor, and my life changed overnight. James was well-versed in the practices of nonviolence. He'd go on to teach me and so many others the practices of the philosophies of Mahatma Gandhi. Gandhi systematically dismantled British imperial rule over India via agape. That's Greek for brotherly love. Social change will be our guiding force. Encouraged, other students and I would create SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And my future, my life, would be altered in ways that far outweighed my imagination.
In 1960, Greensboro, North Carolina, a few buddies and I, we sat down at a Woolworth's counter and waited to be served. We were not. We stayed there to closing and returned the next day. This went on for weeks. Little did we know our actions would set off the support of 50,000 students. Sit-ins would become a part of the civil rights movement.
I took a cue from these young activists and began to organize sit-ins through SNCC in Nashville the spring of 1960. This would be my first foray into the treacherous waters of sit-in desegregation.
Our establishment doesn't serve Negroes.
That don't bother me. I don't eat them.
We were like monsters to them. They were horrified to have us here, which was fitting because we were horrified to be here. There was no violence that day, but as you could suspect, we didn't have long to wait. But we had gathered troops. When one man would fall, the next would be right behind. We knew we were in for a fight, and we were ready.
It was the afternoon after the bombing of that black lawyer's house, and a whole day after all those people were beat up down at that lunch counter. I'd heard he was the lawyer helping the people that were arrested in all those sit-ins downtown. I remember it, you know, because I was in my office at my desk. I heard something, the faint shuffling of feet. When I looked out the window onto Jefferson Avenue, I saw people walking. There must have been, I don't know, 2,000 people. They were just walking, you know, just walking quiet like. I felt compelled to join, so I did. Young kids from schools and people just came out and joined us. We marched right up to the courthouse. Someone, a young kid, started to sing. We shall overcome. It met my ears from far across the square. I'd never seen anything like it.
I don't know how long it took for Mayor West to greet us on the courthouse steps, but when he did, he began arguing with one of the ministers about us being there, about the destructions of the sit-ins and the boycotts in the downtown district. I had it. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to hear him. We had to hear him. He had to say that Nashville should have integrated 95 years ago. And so I asked him, Mayor West, do you feel that it's wrong to discriminate against a person solely on the basis of their race or color?
She'd asked me this soul-searching question, this child. It was asked of me as a man, and I decided to answer, frankly, honestly. And in my soul, I knew it was not right. It was not moral to sell someone goods and in the same breath refuse them service. And I had to answer it just exactly that way. Did I expect criticism? Yes. And still, I wouldn't regret my answer that day. It was a moral question, one that a man had to answer, not a politician.
It took many weeks, but after secret meetings between store merchants and sit-in leaders, an agreement was struck. Small groups of blacks would attend various lunch counters. They would be served. Merchants would prepare their staff for this arrangement. Nashville lunch counters were now desegregated. The campaign was a success without further incident.
We interrupt this broadcast with this special announcement. The Greyhound bus from Nashville to Anniston, Alabama has been firebombed. Sources say the bus carrying 7 people of the infamous Congress of Racial Equality, also known as CORE, also riders of the New Free Rider campaign, was last seen billowing with smoke, tires punctured, sitting just off the road near the Forsyth & Son grocery store, 5 miles west of Anniston, Alabama. We take you live.
It was an awful sight. Those poor people on the bus. My husband and me, we were watching from the front porch.
They were stupid if they thought they wouldn't get trouble. All those people coming down here, black and white, together.
Somebody broke a window and threw something in, and next thing we knew, there was black smoke billowing from that bus.
Instigators, plain and simple.
After the assault on the Freedom Ride buses, the adults of CORE wanted to give up and enlist a cooling off period. No one had been killed, but this was all too close for comfort. The cause was almost lost.
In 1946, segregation of interstate travel was struck down, deemed unconstitutional via the Supreme Court case Morgan versus Virginia. Now, Boynton versus Virginia made segregation in bus terminals illegal. Did the South listen?
You'd be wrong if you answered yes. National ruling should have been law, but across Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and Florida, it was business as usual. And this is why the Freedom Rides began, started by CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, whose president was James Farmer. They had decided enough was enough, and so they organized the Freedom Rides. 7 blacks, 6 whites would board a Greyhound or Trailways bus from Washington, D.C. to New Orleans, Louisiana, to challenge whether the laws were being upheld.
Disaster struck. Both buses were ambushed by the Ku Klux Klan and mob-fearing segregationists. The Greyhound bus was bombed in Anniston, Alabama, and the Trailways bus was stopped and boarded by Klansmen who beat and assaulted the riders with baseball bats and chains.
It was May 14th, 1961, Mother's Day.
The students of SNCC would gladly quit school and give up our lives to take over ridership of the buses and complete this campaign. We were at war, and we weren't about to let the momentum stop. I was appointed the new coordinator of the Freedom Rides from Nashville. I was now responsible for sending people into danger, people that I had grown to care about so deeply, that had become my family. I had to do a good job. I had no choice. Their lives were in my hands.
The hotel phone rang. I answered it. The Attorney General starts the conversation by asking, "Who the hell is Diane Nash?" You call her, and you tell her that the Freedom Riders are in danger, so I called her.
Hello, this is Diane. How may I help you?
Miss Nash, hello. I'm John Siegenthaler, Assistant to Attorney General Robert Kennedy.
Oh my. Well, hello, sir. How can I help you?
I've been told that you are the new coordinator for the Nashville departure of the Freedom Riders, and that there are more riders from Nashville coming?
Yes, sir. Yes, I am. And yes, there are.
I need to tell you, miss, it's urgent. You stop those buses.
Oh, that's not possible. They're not turning back. The students and I have decided that we cannot let violence overcome. They're going into Birmingham, and we are completing this campaign.
Young woman, I realize you are strong in the cause. I hear your voice. I can't begin to understand what the Negroes deal with. I'm just a messenger, but I don't think you are honestly dealing with this situation clearly.
I understand people will be in danger, sir. But you must understand that we have all been fully trained in this.
Oh, yeah, of course you have. The way of nonviolence, I understand. But the people are... The KKK is waiting for you at the end of that trip, and they're not going to throw you a party.
Well, this will be our chance to put all of our training and hard work to the very test that it deserves.
A point that has already been proven, young woman. What good is the cause if people are dead? You are courting violence.
If we relent now, we will lose all that we have gained.
Young woman, do you understand what you're doing here? Someone is going to get... You are going to get someone killed if you let that bus go on to Birmingham.
I should let you know, sir. We all signed our last wills and testaments last night before they left. We know someone will be killed, but we simply cannot let violence overcome nonviolence.
Here I am, representing the President and the Attorney General of the United States of America, and this child, this student, was able to convey a strength that I could never hope to have. I got a lecture that night. Never forget it.
May 17th, 1961. When we got to Birmingham, Bull Connor ordered buses stopped and had us all arrested and thrown in jail for our own, quote, protection. That did not matter. More riders kept coming. 300 arrests were made until finally in September 1961, the Freedom Rides accomplished their tasks. Attorney General Robert Kennedy negotiated with the Interstate Commerce Commissions. Regulations prohibiting segregation of interstate travel on buses and train stations nationwide were cemented. We were physically battered, emotionally ragged, but our spirits rose above all that. We were not finished.
The August 28th, 1963 March for Jobs and Freedom will come to be the largest nonviolent organized gathering in the history of America. Roughly 250,000 people attended a peaceful gathering of unity. Anna Hedgeman was the only woman on the Executive Planning Committee. She'd also be key to the march's success.
I'll get that, ma'am.
Thank you, Ada.
Mrs. Hedgeman, Mr. Rustin here to see you. Would you like some tea, coffee, cookies?
No, thank you, Ada. Anna, just stopping by. I want to see how things...
Yes, Bayard. Remember we talked about Dr. Blake, the Presbyterian pastor?
Yes, yes.
Well, he has agreed to hold his National Council of Churches convention in Washington the week of the march. He's going to bring thousands of Presbyterians in support of the march.
Anna, you're amazing.
Also, he would like to speak at the march, so I did let him know he'll need to contact you. How are things progressing on your end?
I got a call from Rabbi Prinz yesterday, and he had only great things to say about you. He also wanted us to know that the American Jewish Congress is in full support of attending the march. We're working on transportations right now.
Very good. Did you get a call from the United Auto Workers yet?
Not yet, but here's hoping.
Oh, you'll win them over, you always do.
Oh, disappointing news from AFL-CIO.
Oh, what happened?
They think the march is too much of a risk. They expect disorder and violence with the gathering of that many people. They think it's going to hurt us in the end.
I'm sorry, Bayard.
I won't say I blame them. There's always the
Well,
chance.
none of that talk. Asa Philip Randolph did not appoint you deputy director and organizer of this march for no good reason. Your reputation as an activist precedes you. You have a history of making history.
Well, this march wouldn't be happening if it weren't for you and Philip.
Oh, well, Asa Philip Randolph was going to have a march in his lifetime if he needed to conduct it himself.
Marching right alongside Dr. King. Can you see them? Right up Independence Way. Imagine. How did you get them together?
Well, Philip was angry with himself when President Roosevelt steered him off of the idea of a march 20 years ago. It was right after he organized the Brotherhood of the Sleeping Car Porters. He felt as though he wasn't making progress.
He is the hardest working
Well, he
man.
was waiting for his moment. And so was Dr. Martin Luther King. He wanted to have a march as well.
How did you know King wanted to march?
He mentioned it on a radio interview. And I thought to myself, if we have two separate marches, we are going to fracture the cause. Philip wanted to march for fair jobs and education, and Martin wanted to march for civil rights. I thought, why not combine the two?
Brilliant.
Surprisingly, it was easy to get them to listen. All ego was pushed aside and agreement for one march was made.
Anna, on a personal note, it's been a joy working with you on the March's executive committee. Pouring all your free time into this, plus having a full-time job at the mayor's office, you've not going to notice.
Thank you, Bayard. Speaking of which, did you get a chance to read the letter that I sent?
Yes, we both read the letter, Philip and I. The others in the committee, I can't speak for them.
And?
Anna, I appreciate the fact you want more women on the planning committee. When you first mentioned this to
You appreciate it, but you didn't act on it, which is why I wrote the letter.
Philip handpicked you to be a part of this because he knows you, he trusts you.
And you don't trust me like the other men on our committee?
You know that's not true. I trust you just as well.
Well, then trust that I know what I'm talking about when I ask you to bring more women into this history-making endeavor. And not just civil rights activists, but women from the educational sector. Dorothy Height. I worked with her organizing the YWCA. She is president of the National Council of Negro Women. She has had the ear of Eisenhower. Oh, and Ella Baker. She has been in support of Dr. Martin Luther King for how many years now? He knows her. If it weren't for her, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference wouldn't be what it is today. And of course, she spent all that time organizing all those students who have ultimately become the best troops of our cause. And Rosa Parks, there is one woman who should be a part of this. You have a wealth of resources here, Bayard, and you're denying all of them for what?
Anna, I hear you.
No, you don't.
Well now, Mahalia Jackson is singing in the march, and well, she is a woman. Look, I'll talk to Philip again. We still have more room in our program. Maybe someone can speak. Look, I've got to get going to headquarters. Call me if you need anything.
But there would be no more talking. I was beside myself. All the work, all the effort we'd gone through, working on this march with our men for the whole of our people. And women remained invisible. I confided in my good friend, Dorothy Height. She asked me to lunch.
Good to see you, and program for the march.
Read, here.
Oh, tribute to Negro women fighters for freedom. Look at this list. Rosa Parks, Marilee Ellis.
They aren't speaking. They are to sit there like statues. They are to sit there like statues and smile and grin and be happy to be in the illustrious presence of. I won't. And to make matters worse, the wives aren't allowed to march with the men afterward. They won't even let us march when it comes down to...
Oh, hello. I hope I'm not too far behind.
No, you're fine. Just in time. Anna Hedgeman, meet Betty Friedan.
Mrs. Hedgeman, you have no idea how much of an honor.
You wrote The Feminine Mystique. Well, your message is inspiring, but I don't understand.
She'll be joining us for a much-needed meeting of the minds. Please sit. We were discussing the march, feeling ignored, and we were talking about a few things. Proposal, if you will.
You work for the mayor's office, ran for House seat. You were the only woman on the march's executive board. You are a woman to be honored.
Thank you.
And they've ignored you. Well, the reason I wanted to talk to you today is because, well, I think you would agree that the issue goes further than being ignored at a march. You are fighting right alongside the men for equal opportunity, all the while forgetting the fact that you deserve to watch out for yourself in the workplace. Equal pay, equal opportunity, down with discrimination and harassment.
We have to push the issues further.
Exactly. Now, here's what I want of this group.
Group?
Yes, or rather organization. Now, first, there must be an understanding that men are not the enemy, but merely victims of their own outmoded masculine mystique. Women are only handicapped by our sex because we keep copying the same mode of thought. We pass it down to each other. We refuse to compete with them. We argue for acceptance. No more arguing. We want to be accepted. We must train them to do as they must. I feel we need a national organization for women that addresses women's rights on a greater, larger whole. You and Dorothy are the perfect elements to make such an organization a reality. Please say you'll consider joining me.
This meeting was the impetus of the founding of NOW, the National Organization of Women. Anna and I would be among the founders, along with Betty Friedan, activist, and a young black female lawyer, Polly Murray, among others. NOW would lead to more equality and acceptance of women in the workforce and be a help in the feminist movement.
The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom would bring about the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964, followed by the Act of 1968. This act ended racial segregation in schools, workplaces, and places being served by the general populace. The march also featured the I Have a Dream speech, an awe-inspiring piece delivered to 250,000 people, capturing the momentum of a movement in words that would become legendary.
Let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Setting up, so if you are able to stay and see that talk, please do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.